NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. All right, let's dive right in. We got a bit to talk about in this episode. It's been 4 games that the Nets have played in which they went 2-2. A stretch of games in which I had said in my last NetsBoy episode the Nets could very easily go only 1-3. So 2-2 in retrospect is pretty good. But considering how those 2 losses happened and the circumstances surrounding the 2 losses to the Grizzlies and most recently the Hornets, still a bit of a disappointment. So we'll just dive right in and talk about all that. And obviously we'll talk about the big news, which is, of course, the mandate being lifted for performers and athletes. So Kyrie can play. Woohoo! Which he did in that Hornets game and played like complete crap. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's just go one at a time here and start first with the Jazz game in Brooklyn. A game where I thought for sure the Nets were going to lose. I mean, it's a KD game, no Kyrie, right? At that point, the mandate was still being enforced, so no Kyrie, no Seth Curry because of an ankle injury, no Dragic, no Aldridge. It was just KD and the boys against a very, very good top 4 team, though I think now they're in the 5th seed, but still at the time, top 4 team in the West in the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and the Utah Jazz. So I thought for sure that game was going to be a loss. But give credit to the Nets. Their defense in that game was fantastic. They held the Jazz to 106 points. They were rotating. They were guarding the three-point line. They were getting stops. They were rebounding. Claxton was all over the place like he should be and was playing great. And Kevin Durant just carried the load offensively and did enough. And they got enough production from the other players to hang on and actually beat the Jazz without Kyrie and everyone else. So right off the bat, they started off this stretch of games impressing me. I'm saying to myself, wow, that was one hell of a win. And they did it defensively. And if you remember, I said that's the key to this Nets team. They've got to get back to that defensive mentality that they had earlier on in the year before all the injuries happened, because that's going to be the key. So I'm like, this is great. And I'm like, they should be able to beat the Grizzlies now because Kyrie will be able to play in that game. It's in Memphis. And then I find out that Ja Morant's not even going to play in that game, that he's going to miss the game for the Grizzlies. So now it's a KD-Kyrie game. They're coming off one of their better wins against the Jazz defensively. Ja Morant's not playing. And I'm thinking, this is going to be great. I don't know what happened to that great defense that we saw in the Jazz game, but it just was non-existent in the Memphis game. And look, give loads of credit to the Grizzlies. They're 15-2 this year without their superstar, Ja Morant. So you know they're a good team when they're, even when they don't have their star player. Give credit to Desmond Baines and Dylan Brooks and Steven Adams and the rest of those guys. That's a good team. There's a reason why they're the 2 seed in the West right now. They're legit. But you're not going to tell me that the Nets should still not have won that game with KD and Kyrie. And KD and Kyrie combined for, 74 points, I think, in that game. They were great. But the Nets lost because they couldn't play any defense at all and let the Grizzlies make every shot, make every three, and just have their way on the offensive end. And at the end of the day, the Nets ended up losing. What did they lose? They lost by 12 points, but they gave up 132 points. Like, they scored 120 points. If you're going to tell me the Nets are going to score 120 points against a Ja Morant-less Grizzlies, I'm going to assume they're going to win. But no, they lost by 12. And that wasn't even that close of a game down the stretch. It was huge disappointing loss. And like I said, I understand it, right? 15-2 without Ja Morant, it doesn't matter. When you've got KD and Kyrie, you've got to win those games. So I'm like, now I have no idea what to expect from this team after what the game I thought they were going to lose, they won, and the game I thought they were going to win, they lose. So then they play the Miami Heat in Miami. The first place team in the East. Granted, they've been sliding a bit. They've been playing pretty poor of late. The Heat have. It's a Kyrie game. It's on the road. And the return of Seth Curry and Gordon Dragic, and the Nets just hammered the Heat in that game. It was one of the best wins of the year. It reminded me a little bit of the 76ers game. It was kind of like a statement game that the Nets were doing. They dominated in the second half, really pulled away, and just looked fantastic in that game. And the best part about that game was KD and Kyrie didn't have to exert a lot of energy. The other guys stepped up. They both had a chance to rest in the fourth quarter because the Nets are up by so much. So it was just a really great win. And so now I'm thinking to myself, okay, all right, what's going on? This team is inconsistent, obviously, but all right, that's a great win. They've got the Hornets coming up. They've got to win that game. I understand the situation. The Hornets are right behind them. They got to win that game. Especially when the news was earlier revealed that the mandate got lifted. So the mandate gets lifted. Kyrie can play at Barclays Center for the rest of the year. Fantastic. It's what we've been waiting for. Thank God. So you're saying to yourself, again, oh my God, KD, Kyrie, everyone, Dragic, Curry, all of the Nets are basically healthy at this point. Even LaMarcus Aldridge was cleared to play, though he did not play, and we're going to touch upon that in a second. Against the Hornets, and the Nets got to win. They just blew out the Heat, the first place Heat. They got a full team here now, at home in Barclays. Everyone's going to be excited. Kyrie's going to be excited. Everything's going to be great. That loss to the Hornets was one of the most disappointing losses of the year. The whole situation was just a disappointment. Kyrie's first game back, Kyrie was garbage. Maybe he was overexcited because he was finally playing home in Brooklyn. Maybe he was just regressing to the mean because he played so well all year. Maybe he just wasn't used to the fact that he was playing at Barclays Center and wasn't used to playing on the rims because he hadn't done that. Who knows what the reason was. But Kyrie was terrible. And KD, he wasn't really much better himself. He had an off night. And, everyone can point fingers to the back-to-back, but I don't want to hear it, okay? Because at the end of the day, that's a game the Nets should have and needed to win, and they did it. They were up by 14 in the first half. They looked sharp, but all of a sudden in the second half, they just forgot how to play defense again. And the Hornets were getting their way. LaMelo Ball could not miss. Washington was making floaters. Bridges was making threes. All of a sudden, it was like a switch just shifted with the Hornets, and they remembered that they could make threes, and they just couldn't miss. And the Nets just could not make a shot. And if you were going to tell me of these four games, that the Hornets game was going to be the worst game the Nets played and would lose to, I would have said you're nuts, especially when I find out that Kyrie was healthy and able to play in that game, and same thing with Curry, and same thing with Dragic. Like, how? And to add insult to injury, by losing to the Hornets, the Nets are now the 9 seed. The 9 seed, and lost the tiebreaker with the Hornets. Like, it's just a compoundment of disaster from that game Sunday night. Compound. So now the Nets are 39-36 and are the 9th seed. And they don't even have the tiebreaker with the team that's above them. Very, very disappointing loss. And look, it's hard to point a lot of fingers of who to really blame in that loss. Obviously, Kyrie playing as poorly as he didn't help. And Durant having a mediocre game for him didn't help. But the reality is, I'm once again going to blame Steve Nash. Because, look, I get it. Andre Drummond was having a great game. He was the only one who had a good game for the Nets in that Hornets game. We had like 22 points and like 14 rebounds, something like that. But that was the game plan. That was the game plan for the Hornets. They were sending blitz double teams at Kyrie and KD every time. So that's why Drummond was open down the middle. And Drummond capitalized. Give him credit. But they lost that game because the Nets could not play any defense. And they kept on switching. And if you notice down the stretch of that game, even when the Nets went on their run to take the lead back, just to lose it immediately with 3 minutes to go, the Hornets just focused on switching and having the mismatch with Andre Drummond guarding a guard, whether it was Bridges or Melo Ball or Terry Rozier. Melo Ball? No. Yeah, LaMelo Ball. Or Terry Rozier or P.J. Washington, who's kind of a hybrid forward, he just couldn't guard him. They would go one-on-one. They would dribble right past Andre Drummond. And then what needs to happen is there needs to be help defense from the side, which Durant or Curry or Bruce Brown or whoever was in at the stretch would do like they're supposed to. And what does that do? It leaves the corners wide open for Caleb Martin to have an open, uncontested three after he made that ridiculous 1-foot three, to leave Mikal Bridges open or Rozier open. That is poor defense. And why didn't Steve Nash say, you know what, let me put Claxton in? As great as Drummond had, they lost that game because of defense, because Drummond could not guard the perimeter. And Drummond can't guard the perimeter. And that's not a knock on him. He just physically can't do it. He's a big body interior defender. So when you're getting your butt whooped because players are switching and Drummond has to guard your point guard at the top of the key and they're penetrating, getting open threes, you got to do something, Steve. Why wasn't Claxton in? It doesn't make any sense. Put Claxton in and say, come on, play this switching game with me, all right? Let Claxton guard at the perimeter. We know that's what Claxton thrives at for a 6'11" guy. 0 cents. But Steve Nash, for some reason, it's almost like he looked at the stat book instead of watching the game. Well, Drummond has 22 points and 14 rebounds, so he's clearly been having a good game. You got to keep him in. Instead of saying with his eyes what the situation was. It was very, very poor. Very, very bad coaching down the stretch of that game. And the Nets didn't make any shots down the stretch. Durant missed shots that he normally makes. Kyrie kind of made some shots towards the end, but at that point it was too late. But really a game was lost in the defensive end. A game that they needed to win. And it's just, to me, it's inexcusable. It's inexcusable. They should not have lost the game. A real coach would have saw it and made the right decision. I say it every time. Steve Nash, at least this year, has cost the Nets, in my opinion, at least 5 to 6 wins. At least. With his dumb defensive philosophies or his dumb strategies or his inability to understand the rotation. Yet, I will give him props. He's figured out the rotation now, which takes me to my final point. The Nets rotation I like a lot. The players that they're playing now, with them being all relatively healthy, except for obviously Ben Simmons, who the hell knows when the hell he's going to play. Like, I don't even want to even talk about Simmons because we don't know what's going on. We know he's got a herniated disc. Herniated disc. And I said disc, okay? Herniated disc in his back. And, and we know we got the epidural to try to help with the pain and this and that, but we still don't know when he's going to play. We know Joe Harris is out for the year. So it's just kind of like, this is the team. And I know a lot of people think LaMarcus Aldridge should probably be in this rotation, but the reality is the way this team's constructed with the offense of Durant, Kyrie, Seth Curry, Dragic, Patty Mills, who, by the way, he's another one that started to drive me nuts. I don't know what happened. He went from being able to make every three known to man to can't even, throw the basketball in the ocean at this point. But hopefully he figures it out sooner rather than later. I think Patty's just kind of regressing to the mean a little bit because he was off to such a great start at the beginning of the year. but I want to believe that he's going to figure it out and shift it again because that's the way Patty is. So, but he's been poorly. But with all those players offensively, the Nets don't really need another offensive player. So as much as I love LaMarcus Aldridge and as good as he's played this year, I think this makes a lot of sense to keep Drummond and Claxton as the two main bigs in the rotation because they provide defense and rebounding that LaMarcus Aldridge just doesn't give you. Aldridge is a much better offensive big, but under these circumstances, that's not what they need. And it's also the same thing with Cam Thomas not being in the rotation. I think that makes sense too. Everyone knows I'm a big Cam Thomas fan. But once again, he's an offensive-minded player. And with the team the Nets have, the offense is not the issue right now. I like Kessler Edwards being in the rotation. That makes sense. He's a 3-and-D type of player. Defensive player, can stretch the floor. Makes sense. I'm okay with Bruce Brown and James Johnson getting sporadic minutes, for this defensive end. The Nets need defense, as shown with the Grizzlies' loss and most recent the Hornets' loss. They don't need offense. They're still scoring over 110 points a game. So, look, if you were to say to me who's the best big on the Nets, I would say it would be Drummond. And then I say that Claxton and Aldridge are at the same level, but they're different and provide different things. So that's why it's Claxton. And you know what? It should become Claxton more and more because what Claxton brings to the Nets is more than any of the other bigs. His defensive consistency, his ability to switch, his ability to shot block is better than anyone else on the team. So that is why this is what the rotation is. And I think it's good. And I do give, I give Steve Nash credit for now figuring that out. It will be very interesting to see what this rotation would look like if and when Ben Simmons joins the fold. But like I said, no one knows when that's going to happen. So let's not even worry about that. But overall, like I said, a 2-2 stretch of games, I will take it, but it just should have been better. They should have been at least 3-1. But what can you do? Because as you know, I say it every week, anyone can beat anyone on any given night. But now, let's look at the next couple games for the Nets. They have 7 games left. Look, they got to go 6-1 these last 7 games. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's what they need to do to get to 45 wins, which is what I said the target should be, under the circumstances. And 6-1, these next 7 games is very, very doable. Let's look at the next 3 games for the Nets coming up. Pistons, Bucks, Hawks. Look, Pistons game got to be a win. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Worst team in basketball. One of the worst teams in basketball. Granted, they're playing better late. You can't lose to the Detroit Pistons, okay? Because then they got probably 2 of the tougher games they're going to have of these last 6 games against Giannis and the Bucks and then Trae Young and the Hawks. The Hawks game, the Nets need to win as well. Ow, bit myself. That's what happens when you talk too much. You bite yourself. The Nets need to win that Hawks game just as much as they need to win that Pistons game. Because you don't want the Nets to all of a sudden drop to the 10 seed now, do we? I mean, because that's the Hawks are the 10 seed. So they've got to win that game. As a matter of fact, every game the Nets need to win, except for one, to get to 45 wins. The only game that I feel like I can give a pass on is that Bucks game because it's against the defending champ Milwaukee Bucks. However, with Kyrie being back full-time now, that's a game the Nets should win, in my opinion, as well. Because I really do believe with KD and Kyrie and Curry and Dragic and the way this rotation is, the Nets should be the favorite in all these games. So I'm giving them one slip-up the rest of the year. 7 games, you should be the best team, the better team of all these teams playing. One slip-up. So pick and choose your slip-up, Nets. Pistons, Bucks, Hawks, the next 3 games. I'll let the Nets slip up against the Bucks because that's the best team, so that you go 2-1 the next 3 games, and then end the season on a 4-game winning streak against the Rockets, Knicks, Cavs, and Pacers. All three of those 4 teams are in the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Well, excuse me, the Rockets aren't in the Eastern Conference. Are in the bottom of the league the Knicks, Rockets, and Pacers. And only the Cavs team is the only team that's considered to be a good team that the Nets will play in that final stretch. But even then, the Nets should win that game. There is no reason for these slip-ups anymore. The chances for the Nets to get to the 6th seed are very slim at this point. And it's not necessarily because they can't catch the Cavs, who have really free-fallen, but now it's like they can't catch the Raptors. Raptors just don't lose. And the Raptors are now 3.5 games up on the Nets with 7 to go. It does not seem very good. The Cavs, at least, the Nets play one so they can make up one more game. And the way the Cavs have been playing, the Nets could pass the Cavs. But it doesn't look promising. And right now they're the 9th seed. The guys still also now jumped the Hornets. Whatever, I'm done. Let me know what you guys think about all these things. If you agree with me that Steve Nash is costing the Nets loads of games with his stupidity and that the Nets need to figure out this defensively and play Claxton down the stretch more and just start winning these games. And if you agree with me that a 6-1 stretch, the last 7 games, is more than doable, and that gets the Nets to 45 and 37. And that should get them at least the 8th seed at this point, if not maybe even the 7th seed. Doubtfully the 6th seed. But they need to win these games, at least as long as they don't have to play the Raptors now in Toronto, with the mandate being rolled back in Brooklyn. The Nets should be in good shape as long as they just make the 7-8 seed and be in that play-in. Let me know what you guys think about everything. Rabbled on for too long. Wrapping up this episode. Until the next NetsBoy, this is NetsBoy shaking his head at a disappointing end of these last 4 games and signing off.
When the Nets just